Hello. So for my last punctuations, I chose to tackle commas and semicolons. I think I overuse commas and use them when I don't have to use them, and I just never ever use semicolons when I could actually use them. So I get them confused. They're kind of similar in a way when to use one or the other. But so starting with commas, the first rule, there's actually 5 rules. The first rule, use a comma to separate two independent clauses using a coordinating conjunction. So your coordinating conjunctions, the connecting words, if you remember, is fanboys, and fanboys stands for and, nor, but, or, so, yet. I think that's what it was. So you start with your first independent clause, and then you use the comma, and then you put a fanboy. So it's independent clause, comma, fanboy, and then your next independent clause. So to connect those. So my example here, I have the students reviewed for an exam, comma, and, which is one of my fanboys, and the teacher corrected the term papers. So my two independent clauses is the students reviewed for the exam, the teacher corrected the term papers, and then I used the comma and then my fanboy and to connect my two independent clauses. And then the second rule is to use a comma to set off introductory phrases. So phrases that start with after, before, if, although, because. So for my example, I have, after a particularly sweaty yoga session, as my introduction, comma, Julie was looking forward to taking a hot shower. So after a particularly sweaty yoga session, that's my introduction, comma, and then whatever happened after the yoga session. And then my third rule, which is pretty much, everyone knows this one, you use a comma between all items in a list or a series. So, for example, I have, I must go to the store to pick up fruit, comma, milk, comma, eggs, comma, and cheese. So in between every fruit, after every item I have a comma. And then I'd like to point out the last item, so and cheese, the comma goes before the and I believe that's called a Harvard comma or a Stanford comma. One of those commas, they always for the last item and then the comma. So kind of different to the first row, which is the comma and then you have your independent clause, whereas in this list you don't have a full sentence after that. And then the fourth rule kind of refers back to the third rule with the commas in between the lists. So a comma can be used between adjectives that could be joined with the word and. So like in my list example, I have, I must go to the store to pick up fruit. The comma could be used as an and. So fruit and milk and eggs and cheese. You wouldn't put and, of course, but yeah, so it could be in place of and. The comma could be in place of and. And then the last rule, you can use a comma to set off any phrase that isn't important. So here I have the scientists, comma, who had flown in from all over the world, comma, were looking forward to discussing their latest findings. So the section that says who had flown in from all over the world isn't important to the sentence. It could just be the scientists were looking forward to discussing their latest findings. So you'd put a comma to set off that phrase that's not important. Yeah. So moving on to semicolons. Okay. So semicolons are kind of similar to commas, like the first rule. However, you use a semicolon when you don't have a coordinating conjunction. So when you don't have fanboys. So a semicolon allows two phrases to be linked together. They have to be two similar links, two similar ideas though. So just like my first example, the students, I have here the students reviewed for the exam, semicolon, the teacher corrected the papers. So in my comma example, I had the students reviewed for the exam, comma, and the teacher corrected term papers. But in this one, I don't have a coordinating junction, so I can't use a comma, so I have to use a semicolon, if that makes sense. And then the second and last rule used in semicolons is an exception when you're explaining a list, but when the list is going into more detail about a certain object, the semicolon is used as like a big comma. So I'll go over this. So for example, when you're like saying a place, you'd say Honolulu, comma, Hawaii, right? But when you're saying multiple places in a sentence, you wouldn't say Honolulu, comma, Hawaii, what is it? Nevada, Reno, whatever, that whole comma. You wouldn't use commas in that sentence when you're explaining one place, but going into detail about that one place, you wouldn't use a comma after a comma after a comma. So for example, I have here San Francisco, comma, California, because San Francisco is in California, semicolon, Tijuana, comma, Mexico. So the semicolon is used as a big comma to separate the two places when you're going into detail about that one place, if that makes sense. Yes. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for my comma and my semicolon. I will post these examples so that you can kind of have a visual of what I'm talking about. So 5 rules again for commas: comma, fanboy, introductory sentence in a list, replaced with the word and to set off any phrase that isn't important. And then for semicolon, it's kind of like comma, but if you're not using a fanboy, then you would use like a semicolon, and it'd also be used as a big comma. So yeah, thank you.